have had this experience when we're driving our car and we're getting ready to turn right or turn left, and we turn maybe a little tighter on that corner than we need to, and bam! Our tire hits that big old pothole that everyone else has been hitting as they turn a little too tight and run off the pavement of the road, right? We've all done that. And it's just a small correction in our thinking and our driving that would fix it so that we're not tearing up our tires and undercarriage and whatever else is in there when we take that turn too tightly. Now, that's just a small thing that we can change to help protect our cars. Now I'm going to talk about something bigger, something affecting many of us in our nation now. For instance, if we see a woman pushing a grocery cart down the street and it's just full of all kinds of miscellaneous stuff and it looks like junk. She's not dressed very well, her hair's a mess. What do we first think? Why doesn't that woman go get a job? Might be something that crosses our mind. Or we just got into our car in a parking lot and we see a black man walking towards us with dreadlocks. Do we immediately hit the lock button to lock our doors? Or we see a woman in town and she's got a head covering on and a man beside her who looks very Middle Eastern in nature, and what do we think? Do we think, is he a terrorist? Honestly, if I have to be honest with myself, I've thought and done all of those things. To my great shame and regret. Today, in today's gospel, which I had marked and now I've got to find it, so give me a moment. Jesus gave us very clear directions about what I was just talking about. And as soon as I find the passage, I'll read it to you. Jesus said, "Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned." Now those words that Jesus spoke is all about making judgments upon people and about people. And now, it is a natural thing to make, as soon as we meet someone new, we automatically make some kind of judgment about them. They're tall, they're short, they're, whatever, attractive or intelligent or whatever. We make judgments about people all the time. That's natural as part of being human. The question is, are we making negative judgments about those people? Now, this verse that Jesus gives us today is part of a much longer discourse. It's really a sermon that Jesus is giving to his people. We call it the Sermon on the Mount. Now this is Luke's version of the sermon. It's shorter than the one that's recorded in Matthew. But these verses are in both of them. And they're very powerful words that we don't often consider and think about, but I'm going to nail us with them today. Jesus, in that same discourse, in that same sermon, right before he says, "Do not judge," he says, "Love your enemy." One of the hardest verses, I think, in Scripture, when we honestly think about it. And in the same verse we read today, right before this, he said, "Be merciful as your Father is merciful." And then later in the discourse, later in the sermon, he said, "The good man brings out of his heart the good things that are stored up therein." It's not easy to change. But first, we've got to recognize that we have a problem. Yesterday, I was doing my yard work and I had the weed whacker going. It's a cordless weed whacker, and all of a sudden it stopped going. And I thought, well, that's odd. The battery shouldn't be dead yet. So I went and got another battery and plugged it in, and nothing. It wasn't working. I thought, shoot, this thing's only a couple years old. It shouldn't have died yet. And So I was really frustrated. I just finished what I could. I had an old weed whacker that really is held together with duct tape, and I tried to finish up with that. Well, afterwards, I thought, you know what? I'm not going to just throw this thing away. I'm going to see if I can fix it. So I took the first half of it apart, and there's the switch in there that when you push on the handle, the little switch goes pop, and it sends the current down to the motor. So I thought, maybe the switch is bad. So I bypassed the switch, nothing happened. So then I took the rest of it apart, exposing the motor down at the bottom of the unit. And as I was messing around with it, I realized the wire, one of the wires leading to the motor was loose. Just popped right out. And that's why it wasn't working. So rather than throw it away, I ran to Walmart and got a soldering kit. Never soldered anything in my life before. So I watched YouTube videos to learn how to solder. And it's not hard, but it did take me a while to fix it. But I did. Soldered it, put it all back together, and it works great. And in order to fix our hearts, first we've got to acknowledge that we have a problem. And so we invite God to help us see what's going on in our hearts. Because sometimes we can't see it. And we're blind to it. Secondly, after we examine our hearts and we've got God working on us and we begin to realize we have a problem, secondly, we invite God's Holy Spirit to come in and begin that process of changing our hearts, of renewing our heart. See, once I figured out what was wrong with the weed whacker, it had the loose wire, then I had to do something to fix it. Unless I was just going to throw it away and get a new one. And that's what God wants to do. He knows our hearts. He knows what's going on in our minds and our hearts, and He wants to step in and transform you into the image of Christ. But He's not going to force it on you. You've got to invite Him in. So secondly, after you've examined your heart, you invite Him in to begin that process. Now again, this is a process. It will take time. When I first started soldering that thing, I almost gave up because I was trying to solder it and stick the wire in, and then it was too big and it wouldn't fit the hole, and I got really frustrated. And it took me a while to figure it out and to get it in there until it was working. Well, I finally got it soldered and in place, and it's working fine. It's a process that God does in our hearts as well. It's not this instantaneous, miraculous change that happens all at once. That's very rare. It does happen on very rare occasions. But most of us need this process where God does a little bit at a time, where He's working in our hearts a little bit at a time to bring us along until we're in the image of Christ that we're all looking for and that God wants for us. So we invite the Holy Spirit in to make that change. And what happens when the Holy Spirit comes into our lives and our life begins to transform into the image of Christ, what happens is the fruit of the Holy Spirit begins to become evident. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, goodness, faithfulness, self-control. All of those things begin to just naturally come up out of our hearts. But we can't generate them on our own. We can a little bit. You know, our personal self-will can make a lot of changes in our lives. No question about it. A lot of folks have gone on diets and lost a lot of weight just by their will, etc. And we can, by just self-reflection and personal willpower, change our lives in the ways that I'm talking about. But you know, I've noticed that when people do it that way, it usually doesn't last. And then when things begin to go wrong in their lives and in their circumstances around them, that often that isn't enough to sustain them. That's why we need God. So that's what we can do at the individual level. What about our nation? Our nation's going through an incredible upheaval right now. I mean, it's not a civil war, but there's a lot of protesting going on. There's a lot of people who are angry and frustrated and upset about all kinds of things having to do with our nation. What do we do about that? We as Christians, we're also called to transform our society through Christ. When we bring the gospel of Jesus Christ into our community, into our nation, into the world, it changes and transforms our society. You see, all of the ideas that are being put forward now by sociologists, psychologists, and politicians, and you name it, those answers are incomplete. They can't address the root of the problem, which is our depravity and our sinfulness in our life. It can't address those things. It can only superficially cover them up or deal with them by putting people in jail. Only the power of Jesus Christ can change a person's heart and make them new. And change them, a person full of hate to a person full of love. Only God can do that. And that's what we're called to do as a Christian, as an individual, but also as a church, is to bring the gospel into our nation, into our community, into the world. Quick story and I'll wrap it up. I've told this story before, but it's so powerful, I want to repeat it. On March 9th, 1831, Charles Finney wrapped up a 6-month preaching campaign in Rochester, New York. Over 100,000 people came to Christ because of his preaching. In other words, God moved in that city. You know what? Crime dropped by 2/3. The jails were mostly empty for 2 years. Can you imagine if our jails were empty? That year has been known as one of the greatest spiritual awakenings that our country has ever seen. An entire city was transformed by the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that's what our nation needs. Not just in one community, not just in one city, not just in one state, but our nation and our world needs the gospel. So, what I'm calling us to do is, number one, we've got to do what we need to do in our life personally. And then we pray and ask God to move in our nation and in our world. Let us pray.